guys? Welcome to this latest episode of the show. We have a major guest in today. We have Bobby Marks in the building. We are pretty much honored to have Bobby, who is one of the most respected front office minds in the NBA. He's also a salary cap analyst. Bobby has been an NBA executive for the over the past decades or 2 decades, I would say. Also been an assistant general manager for the Brooklyn Nets. He's now serving as an insider and a salary cap expert for ESPN, where he basically breaks down trades and contracts and roster building strategies with some unmatched clarity and expertise. Bobby, it's truly a pleasure to have you on the show. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Did I miss anything on my presentation?
Your presentation was perfect.
All right. How did your journey in the NBA front office pretty much started? Tell me a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. My journey was I needed to graduate college. I went to Marist College up in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I needed to graduate. And I was 6 credits short. And really, the only way, unless I wanted to go back up to college for a fall semester, was to do some type of internship. And I was fortunate to get an internship with the then New Jersey Nets in the summer of 1995, and worked in public relations, doing a lot of different things, and cutting newspaper clips and making copies and writing press releases. And when my internship was over, I got my 6 credits, but I couldn't find a job. I sent out the standard letters and got the same response back. And I asked Willis Reed, who was the GM at the time, if I could stay on and work and do an internship in basketball operations. And he said, great. And it was for free. And I stayed on and did an internship in basketball ops. And we were really small. So basketball ops is the front office and coaching and players and scouting. And so it allowed me to kind of learn how the whole department worked. And then was fortunate and got hired in January of 1996, working in basketball as a basketball ops assistant, kind of a glorified, I guess, internship role. And that is kind of how my journey into professional sports started.
That's pretty awesome. You know, I'm in Philadelphia right now. I've been there for the past 10, 15 years, and I follow sports here. And I paid attention to Howie Roseman's, the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles, beginning also, and he was, giving a pretty similar story with him, at a very young age, starting to send letters, multiple thousand, hundreds of letters to different teams and trying to get into the industry. So it's pretty refreshing to hear it, I
was kind of like the last man standing. I think there was 30 of us in our internship class. I was fortunate because 29 of them went back to college, and I was the only one who I think was a graduating senior here. So I got fortunate, and there's a lot of different journeys that people. You mentioned a great one with Howie Roseman, the GM of the Eagles. I mean, Eric Spoelstra, Frank Vogel, all different coaches started in video rooms.
Right.
The beauty, as I said, the beauty with my internship, my double internship, was that I kind of learned how every part of basketball ops worked, whether it be video or equipment or scouting. And I didn't really kind of learn the salary cap and take that on until about 2000. So that was about 4 years after I had already started and everything. But yeah, I think everybody's journey is a little bit different. Ours is maybe, I guess, the probably old school way. I always have a hard time answering when someone asks me, like, what would your recommendation as far as how you got in? Like, I'm like, well, mine is a lot different than it was 30 years ago with the Nets, just because things were different. I always tell people the funny story, and they always look at me side eyes. I'm like, like, we didn't really have the internet back then. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, we had it called AOL dial-up. And that's how you got on the internet. Even I was in New Orleans about 2 weeks ago at the Tulane sports law negotiation, and all my and NBA buddies were there. And I'm kind of, I guess, more of the senior. And I always tell them the funny story that when I started, how we read about transactions, right? Like there was no Shams or Woj or Twitter or none of that stuff. We had a room in 405 Murray Hill Parkway in East Rutherford, New Jersey. We had the top floor of an office building. That was our quasi, I guess, practice facility where our offices are. And in this room was a computer. It was like almost like working for the CIA, right? Like only 3 people had a key to this room. And in this room was just a computer and a desk sitting there. And there was a program called Lotus Notes, which is probably still used today. But Lotus Notes dialed into the NBA system, right? The NBA league offices. So when the New Jersey Nets wanted to waive a player or trade a player or sign a player, I would go on there and say the New Jersey Nets have signed Kenny Anderson to a 3-year contract. And then what happened was at the end of the day, you would go back in that office and then all these printouts and stuff. And that's how you read about people getting traded and signed and waived and all these things like 7 hours after. Can you imagine that now? Like that probably would not have. I always tell Woj that story and he's like, man, I wish I had a key to that room. I'm like, well, eventually you somewhat did. But yeah, so times have changed. I would say, getting into sports now there's probably a lot more opportunity because there's a lot more jobs, right? Front offices have expanded from 10 to, I don't know, 70, for example, but there's always so many more people who want to get into sports. That's the biggest thing is there's so much more of an appetite, whether it be scouting or analytics or trying to work in a front office or coaching and all these different things here. So it's a little bit different than maybe someone who's breaking into sports now, as far as my journey 30 years ago.
Right. Now we have guys like your buddy Woj, who's back in college now in the front office position, or Shams, or Adam Schefter for the NFL, and all these great guys that are doing tremendous work out there. But what would you say was the most valuable lesson that you pretty much learned during your time as an NBA front office executive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most probably one of the most valuable ones, and I told the story a couple weeks ago, is really to kind of treat everyone as equal. I tell the story of, and this was kind of post Nets. Austin Reaves' agent, Aaron Riley, who is based in New Jersey, had nobody, like clients, right? After I had left the Nets and I was in the media and I was doing some stuff draft prospect wise, he reached out to me. He says, "Hey, I got this skinny white kid who went to Wichita State in Oklahoma named Austin Reaves." I was like, "I have never heard of this guy ever before." And he said, "Like, would you mind sitting with him and we're helping him with the draft process as far as the interviews and getting him comfortable?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" So we did our thing and, he was awesome. And then, the story goes to, undrafted 2-way. Now he's with the Lakers. And whenever I see Aaron, he always and it kind of makes me embarrassed a little bit. And he says this to people. He's like, he's the only one who would call me back. Like he had no idea who I was, I wasn't this big time agent, but he was the only one who would call me back and give me the time of day. So I would say there's a lot of different lessons I can tell, but I always say that it's kind of like, treating everyone with equal respect because you never know, like when you might need that person or when don't treat them just because they have the number one pick in the draft, the agent differently or the player differently than a player that a fringe second rounder and everything, or if you're running a team you have a roster. Don't treat your superstar differently than your 14th guy on your roster because there's going to be a night when you're going to need that 14th player on your roster to come in and make some shots.
That's absolutely true. How different would you say analyzing a team's cap situation from the outside is from while you were pretty much managing it internally as an assistant GM or any other front office position?
I think I have probably a better grasp of it than I did when I was working for a team. When you're with the team, that's what you're focused on, right? Like you're worried about the New Jersey or Brooklyn Nets, right? This is kind of who they are. For me, having been in the media almost over 10 years, like I have a responsibility to 30 fan bases. right? Like I have a responsibility to talk about the Sacramento Kings or the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Like that's my responsibility to know where they are financially, where they are roster wise, where they are, who's eligible to sign an extension, who's 2 ways up. I have an obligation to know everything and anything about all 30 teams there. Whereas I said, when you're working with it, when you're working with a team, you're kind of just like,
Focus on that team.
yeah, you're kind of like, you got blinders on and everything. Like I always tease people in front offices. I said, the best thing that you could ever do is just take a year off, go on a sabbatical, and just look at because you'll look at the league a lot differently than kind of how you look at it. It probably gives you better ideas as far as maybe how you build out your roster by just analyzing what some teams are able to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. What skills would you say are like pretty much critical for your success as a front office executive?
I mean, I think it's important. I think you got to learn how to write. I think that's something like if I had a do over, coming out of college, working for a team, and then transitioning to the media, the ability like I've been playing catch up for the last 11 years because of learning how to write, and it's not just articles that come on ESPN.com, but if you're working in a front office and you're writing, you're putting together, whether it be an outlook on where your roster is going, or an analytics analytics paper on your team, or maybe it's talking about the draft. It's learning how to write. I tell the story when Rod Thorne joined the Nets in 2000. Rod Thorne was with the league office forever, and he's the man who drafted Michael Jordan with the Bulls back in, I don't even know what that is, 83 or 84, somewhere around there.
I was not born.
Yeah. So Rod started with us in May of 2000. And so about 6 weeks before the draft, and I gave him a book to take home, a scouting book, and on all prospects. And he called me like that next day, and he was like yelling at me because there was grammatical errors in there. Now, I didn't write the reports; these are from our scouts. But I always say, like, the lesson is that whether you're working in the media or working for a team, like grammar matters when you're presenting. When you're going up and doing a presentation, don't have any spelling errors in there, right? Like you could have the greatest presentation ever, but I'm going to remember that you used the wrong word, or you basically forgot to take out. You're talking about Draymond Green, but you have Jalen Duren's name in there because maybe you're working on a different project and everything like that. So I think grammar is important. I think spelling, of course. I think how you present things is important, and then of course the writing aspect of it.
Just like how you were expressing the challenges 30 years ago regarding the job market in itself, and how to get into a front office position, for instance, when you're talking about how important writing is for anybody who's aspiring to positions like that. Do you think obviously we in a technology era now with artificial intelligence and
I've never gone on there. I can't do it because it will cloud my brain.
But do you think is it something that could still be, if used properly, something that could help people in the writing styles and developing that, honing that skill, or would you recommend completely staying out of it and just go the old school way?
I think there's value to it probably from a research standpoint. I mean, I'm seeing all these different sites, and I think it's fun. Like people like, hey, tell me what early bird rights are, right? And then you get like this whole spit out. Even like I was looking at one of my Gmails on an email, and it's like it tells you now like an overview of what the email is, right? So I do think there's a lot of value from a research standpoint. From a writing standpoint, like I get extremely nervous to go on one of those sites there because I don't want to be like, wow, that's really good writing. Like I would rather have my editor work their butt off trying to clean up my mess because it's coming from me, right? It's coming from me. I'm not reliant on. It's the same thing. Like when I do my research, like I do all my research. Like there's nobody feeding me information. Like I've started working on the off season 2 weeks ago. And I started outlining all my teams, and it's me typing in and looking at information and getting an idea as far as what some of the storylines are going to be and everything, because I don't want somebody handing me the information where I'm basically just memorizing it.
Right.
I just kind of know I have a good comfort level, and I think that's kind of a little bit the same with with AI. I do think there's a lot of value to it and everything. As I said, from a research standpoint, providing information that's and making you kind of learn differently than maybe you would before.
You and I had that conversation when we met in Vegas last summer. I have the answer to that, but I have you on the show, so I have to ask you: Would Bobby be interested in going back in the NBA as a general manager for the right situation for you and your family?
For the right situation. How's that sound? I always say, like, I always find it funny. I really stay off social media a lot and really try not to respond. And I did it. I don't know if we talked about this. I did it a year ago, and some guy was like, "You'll never work in. This is why you'll never work in the NBA." I know everyone always uses that like funny line, like, "You'll never work in the NBA again." I'm like, "Well, shoot, I worked 20 years. I did my 20 years and stuff like that." And then I said to them, "Well, like, I don't pay state taxes, and I live in Florida, and like, it's 80 degrees out right now, and like, I can go for a walk and like enjoy my life and stuff like that." So I would say it has to be for the right opportunity that would come by, that would make sense. Certainly for me and my family, because I really enjoy what I do at ESPN, and I really enjoy what I do at Sports Business Classroom, and I enjoy teaching and educating and making having people enjoy. I don't think we've ever had so many people enjoy like reading about the CBA and transactions and how rosters are. We never thought the apron would be like a cool term, as far as how people go about doing that. So I think it would have to be the right opportunity.
Okay, you brought the apron. I want you to kind of just briefly explain in the simplest term
Oh,
to new
yeah.
folks, what the CBA is and what it entails, and how this new CBA and the second apron, specifically, because there's been so many debates and conversations about it.
Yeah.
How has that really affect roster constructions in the league?
Yeah. So so this new CBA started in 2023. Prior to it, so basically the CBAs are almost like the Olympics. They almost like 2017, 2023. The prior year was 2011, probably a little more spaced out. How you should think about the CBA is almost like you're building a house, right? And every time there's a CBA, you're adding a couple rooms. Sometimes it's drastic, sometimes it's minor. The 2023 was kind of in between. There was a period with Golden State, the Clippers, Brooklyn, where spending was out of control. Spending to the point where teams were paying hundreds of $1 millions in luxury tax penalties, and there was no restrictions as far as outside of the luxury tax, as far as how you add to your roster. Okay. So what happened with this new CBA is that the league came in and said, you know what, teams can still draft and add and all that. However, we are going to basically, Dan Patrick on a Dan Patrick show asked me about it. Like, if you're explaining it to a group of fourth graders, basically it's like, instead of having 10 toys, you're going to basically have to pick your 4 favorite toys. So how these rules work is that it allows you to draft. If you draft well and you develop and you make shrewd trades, you'll be able to retain all these players. What it won't allow you to do is go out and, if you're a high spending team, go out and add a $20 million player in free agency, or go out and trade for a player and take back more money in a deal. So if you were trading out in the past, if you were trading out a $45 million player, you were going to take back, if you could take back like a $55 million player, and there was no restriction as far as repercussions. Now, based on where you are financially, with the apron, that's first and second apron, I guess it's somewhat of a hard cap, I would say. it limits you as far as how you can add to your roster outside of your own players on your team. So when you're Cleveland, okay, who is a second apron team, so they're the highest level. They haven't hard capped themselves because they couldn't, because they, basically are already over this threshold. They can go out and trade for James Harden because guess what? Darius Garland and James Harden make the same amount of money. They can go out and trade for Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis because they're sending out more money with DeAndre Hunter. It still allows you to go out and make trades and everything like that, but there's rules that you now have to follow as far as how you go out and add players. If you're Golden State and I want to go out and sign Al Horford, right, this past summer, I can go out and sign Al Horford. I had the tax mid-level exception, which is at 5.8. However, if you use that roster resource, now you are going to be hard capped at the second apron, and you're going to be limited as far as what else you can add to your roster here. It has certainly balanced out spending. I would debate the person who says it's basically is curb spending. Spending is up from last year. I think last year we spent $5.3 billion in player salaries. This year is at 5.7. Spending is up. The middle class is better. It's better for them as far as the trade rules are better. They're expanded as far as how much you can take a backup player. Like if we were under the old rules, Duncan Robinson wouldn't have been able to go to Detroit and sign and trade. Max Strus wouldn't have been able to go to Cleveland and a sign and trade. All these different rules that would have basically squeezed how trades work wouldn't have been able to happen here. You can debate that the second apron broke up Boston and Milwaukee and Phoenix because of how, Boston had to trade Porzingis and they traded Holiday and they let go Cornet and all that stuff. And you can say that's fine. However, I always remind people like those teams went out and made those moves before these new rules started to apply, before these restrictions really started to hurt. I look at Boston right now. They went from $511 million in payroll to $190 million. They're still a pretty good team.
Indeed.
It makes you really put a focus on your scouting department. It makes you got to draft well. Hugo Gonzalez, who they picked in the 20s, right? You see him come off the bench. Luka Garza, who was a minimum player. Neemias Queta, who is a two-way player. Like it makes you really have to go out and land those under the radar free agents. Now, how the apron hurts and how the apron bites you is if you're Phoenix a couple years ago, where you've got Durant and you've got Booker and you've got Beal and you've got no draft picks and you're basically turning over the minimums every year, right? You just keep on doing it and you don't have draft picks. The interesting team that will follow is what will happen with Oklahoma City, right? Like when Oklahoma City goes out and pays Shea, who Supermax will kick in 2 years, and Chet and Jalen, who are on rookie max extensions, who start next year. They're a second apron team. Now, why Oklahoma City is different, they got all these draft picks. They can continue. They might have 3 first-round picks. They just traded for Jared McCain. Now, will they have to make I know for a Sixer fan that hurts. Will they have to make hard decisions with Isaiah Hartenstein or Lou Dort or some of those things, right? But I always say, I wrote about it in the summer. I said, well, you realize like there was two iterations of those Bulls teams in the 90s. Like like Jordan and Pippen stayed through the 6 championships, but there was 2 different groups in it from the 90 to 93 team and 5 to 97 team. Like those. So yeah, you'll have to make some decisions there, but I like the apron just because it's really leveled the playing field and everything. Are there some things I'd tweak? Certainly here. I understand that people say, well, wait a minute, there's a hard cap and it's limiting spending. What happens is every year is that 60 players get drafted and 60 veterans are going to be looking for a job. Unless we get expansion and we basically expand the player pool, there's always going to be a squeeze on players kind of looking for jobs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was initially skeptical, as pretty much I would say the majority of people, especially the non-experts, when this whole
here's how, since you're a Sixer fan. So here's where the apron hurts Philadelphia. So you go out and trade a player on a controllable contract, Jared McCain, rookie contract, in year 2. And now you have to go out and probably sign Quentin Grimes, right? Like now you're almost forced to go out and do that. Now, unrestricted free agent, what's the price tag? I don't know. But like that's where you're like, you basically have, because if you don't, you're not going to have that much flexibility to go out and sign another free agent from a different team, because the goal is, how the rules are in place, as I said, is to draft, retain, sign free agents, develop, retain, and then kind of go from there. Now, if you lose Grimes and you've already traded McCain, now you're like, well, what are we left? Now we got to basically look into free agency and probably have to go maybe overspend and use one of our exceptions. And now we become hard cap. And there's all these different rules to that.
And I mean, you really hurting me right now, having focusing on the Sixers, because I didn't understand the move, to be quite honest with you. He was on a controllable contract for the next 2 years again. I think the return, I don't really. You giving me a Houston pick that is probably going to be 22, 23 in the draft.
Yeah, you better draft well.
Right,
yeah,
exactly. And you literally just drafted him last year,
which you already did 2 years ago.
Exactly. And I had Eric on the show, and we were talking about that and how I think teams should really, focus on having a more appealing and a better development system within their own organizations, because just like you mentioned, you have to be able to develop within what you already have and give time to these young players to get to 2, 3, 4 years and what they can become. And that's why I love what Brad Stevens did with Boston and all these guys that you named, because
look what
not
they've
a
been
lot
able
of
to
people
do.
were. Yeah,
no, I mean, Jordan Walsh, Gonzalez, Queta,
amazing.
Pritchard. I mean, those aren't guys that were drafted the third pick in the draft.
Yeah.
Derek White trade. Like, it's the San Antonio system. Like, it's plug and play, right? You find guys that fit, you pay them well. Maybe you have to eventually move them off them. And then there's going to be another guy out there that you're going to draft. And then you're going to plug that guy into, somebody else. Like, everybody makes it with Boston. Like, they made the Vucevic trade, and now listen, if his number's too high, you could just you have Queta on your roster.
Exactly. Yeah. Nah, 1,000%. And even, I call Sam Presti the Howie Roseman of the NBA, because even with the SGA situation, the contract is staggered in a way that he's still on the 2-year on his max contract before the Supermax kicks in.
Yeah, that Shea's number this year is below the 20. His percentage
is 22%, right?
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And Thomas Sorber was drafted; is not playing right now. So
Kopech just got back. Yep.
Exactly. So it's like, even when they're gonna they just got McCain back, for instance, so you could, be more comfortable maybe letting Isaiah Joe walk. And, it's just, I just love the thought process, right? Like, that you could see that there's a real effort into playing within the rules and still be as competitive as possible.
Charlotte's a great example. What's going on in Charlotte right now? You mean they're healthy, availability matters, but they nailed the draft. Look, they drafted at 4, and they might have the rookie of the year. Like, with Knipple, and they hit on Kalkbrenner and Sion James, and the big kid Diabates has been really good, and LaMelo's healthy, and they've gotten good lift from their veterans. Yeah, now they're rolling and everything. Like, that team was dead and buried in November.
Yeah, I did an episode of the show where my target was for Charlotte and Toronto was, maybe within the next 2 years, they will be what the Detroit Pistons are now in terms of, like, that. Well, obviously the development of the Pistons also, I think, kind of went a step ahead. But that bracket of up and coming teams that could really make some noise in the East, that's where I see them now.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So Obviously with the CBA again and everything that's happening, I noticed something that teams are pretty much more skeptical, I would say, to just giving out Supermax contracts to players. Would you agree with that?
My good friend Brian Windhorst always phrases it that there's different levels, right? Like there's the Fun Max, which is like what Chet and Jalen Williams signed. It's like the guy, like, listen, three years ago when Cade Cunningham signed that rookie max, people were like, oh my God, the guy is never healthy. And now it's like, it's a steal, like,
Yeah.
so I think there's different levels to it. There's three levels of the max, 25%, 30%, and 35%. I think people are more skeptical when you're paying a player 35% of the salary cap and they're over 30 years old. Like you better make sure like that player ages well with that contract. And I said this when all the Giannis stuff was going on in Milwaukee, and because he's extension eligible in October, I'm like, listen, he's going to get 4 for 275, but man, come see me in 2 years from now. Like, that might not, that $75 million number, like you might be like, wow, that's a, like Paul George. Paul. I know I'm hitting I'm in a soft spot on you. Like the Paul George number, like that's a whopper of a number. 35% of the max of the cap. You gotta. So yeah, I would say that I would say there's probably a little less negotiating with the rookies. Guys who are extending like Victor. They're not going to. There's no negotiation with him. Some maybe a Men Thompson, right? I don't know, but Carl Anthony Towns. Are you gonna pay him the max? Be
I don't know.
careful, right? Like, be
Yep.
careful. Anthony Davis, you gonna pay him the max?
Yeah,
Trey
definitely.
Young, like there's so I do think there was a period where teams were more aggressive giving him out. Now I think you have to be really sure who that player is, where that player is health wise, skill wise. That before you kind of, I think it's okay to negotiate now.
And speaking of, negotiations and stuff, there's always been that I guess I don't know if I want to call it a fallacy, but star players have a lot of leverage when it comes to contract negotiations and whatnot. With this new CBA again and the landscape of the league as it is, do you still think that obviously we just talked about Victor? That's a 1 minute conversation. You just go and tender him the max contract there. SGA last year as well, same. But do you think star players still have that much or so much leverage when it comes to contract negotiations?
I think they have a leverage to the point of if they're not going to extend with their current team. I think extensions kind of play a significant role with. Listen, if you have a player who's extension eligible this summer and there's a ton of them and is not willing to extend with you, what do you want to do? You want to roll the dice and let it play out, or are you going to want to have to move him? And then the player is saying, "Well, that's fine. I'll become a free agent in 2027. So if you trade me here, I'm just going to play out the year."
Yeah.
So I think there's still I still think there's a leverage play there. I do think we have seen an uptick in players extending because
Yeah.
the money is so great right now that people aren't going to pass up signing for $240 million
Yeah.
guaranteed. You
Especially
just
those
can't
mid
do it.
level players.
Yeah, you can't do it now. Maybe if you want to do a shorter term deal and then but free agency, the ability to build rosters nowadays is not through free agency. Maybe through some minor moves and stuff like that. But it's draft, it's trades, it's retaining your own players.
Yeah. I mean, and at the same time, we were talking about Quentin Grimes and my Sixers earlier last year. Jonathan Kuminga, and he did decide to bet on himself, but I don't know if Quentin Grimes is going out there and getting $25 million that he was looking for
Yeah.
last summer.
Yep. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting dynamic right now in the league, and I'm really excited to see where we going with that pretty much. But I want to now go a little bit back to again your time as a GM, as an assistant GM, and conversations with extensions. What do you think in terms of negotiations, right? Like when you dealing with a player and an agency with extensions, what really differentiates negotiations with an elite agency like CAA or Clutch Sports and an up and coming agency, for instance? What do you think kind of makes the negotiations a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, I think listen, extensions are yeah, there's certainly rules too as far as how much you can extend for. We saw Austin Reaves is a good example. Like Austin Reaves is extension eligible, but the most he can sign for, I think the Lakers is like 4 years, $87 million, which he's not going to do. And he said it, and it's no disservice to the Lakers, but it's just basically kind of a financial decision there. I think that from an extension standpoint is that you have to basically from a negotiation, you have to make a decision on guaranteed money or becoming a free agent when you're doing an extension with a team, and then you're basically taking that information and bringing it back to your client. There are some extensions that are cut and dry. Guy Santos, for example, just signed in Golden
Yeah,
State for three
love
years,
it.
$15 million. Guy Santos probably had made a total of $5 million in his
Yep.
career and is now making it in 1 year next year. He could have said, you know what, I want to become a free agent, but I'm going to wind up being a restricted free agent. So I think you have to be in a position where, as I said, like the player works for the agent works for the player. At the end of the day, the agent works for the player. From an extension standpoint, I think as far as as I said, kind of guaranteed money. Now there are decisions like I'm fascinated to see what happens with Anthony Davis this summer. I'm fascinated to see what happens with Trae Young, guys that we had thought were like max extension guys. Well, now it's like if Anthony Davis is making 62 million, can you get him down to 50 and then extend off? Like there's all these different, you know, um, the mechanics as far as, and the good agents know kind of what the landscape of the league is. They might say, hey, summer of 2027, there's going to be 15 teams with cap space. We're just going to roll the dice and go and see what we have out there.
Yeah. Or are you going the 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 Jimmy Butler approach with Golden State? I'm still giving you max money, but shorter years. Because obviously, and that would have been the perfect scenario, I think, for me. Sorry to go back with the Sixers with the Paul George contract. I would have loved max money, but not 4 years. What was it? 4 years or 5 years? I don't even
4 years.
remember. 4 years, yeah, yeah, because he signed four for
Well,
two
that's the other
hundred.
thing is like you have to think like if you're a team, who are the Sixers bidding against?
It was basically the Clippers, and he didn't want to have what a no trade. He wanted to have a no trade clause there.
He
Wasn't that
basically
pretty
would
much?
have to take less than what Philly was offering. So that's the other thing is that you have to think about who am I bidding against,
Yeah,
right? When you're doing something like that.
I agree. If I gotta talk about the Sixers, Bobby, I don't think we gonna get out of here. Um, what do you think has been the most creatively structured contract that you've ever seen? Whether it's from your time as a front office executive to now, with your time as ESPN, what contract would you bring out?
The Embiid contract in 2017. I mean that like with Embiid, and so that was his rookie extension, and he had played basically like 2 years, right? I mean, the whole story. I don't have to revisit. So they basically structured it in a way where basically there was triggers along the way if he got injured, and basically would have reduced the protection amount in this contract and everything like that. I thought that was really smart. It was an NFL style. I call them NFL contracts, right? Where it's kind of a win-win for both sides. You're getting guaranteed money, but the team's also protected on there. Zion contract is fascinating. That was the extension that he signed, 3 or 4 years ago. He signed a 5-year max extension. The first 2 years are guaranteed, but because he didn't play, he didn't hit a games clause in going into year one of that. That basically put years 3, 4, and 5 as far as there's no salary protection. But he can hit if he hits games clause along the way. That can boost it up as far as protection.
And he did recently, I believe.
So he hit 41 games, and now next year's $42 million contract is guaranteed for like $16 million, right? So like I love those type of contracts where like the only way the player's not getting his money is if he's waived, but it also gives the team a kind of a get out of the jail free card if that player who's got an injury history suffers an injury.
I guess the player association is not going to be too happy with what you're saying right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's. Listen, at the end of the day, I think 90% of contracts are guaranteed every year. Like, there's still a good number. I think there's always certain situations. Jonathan Isaacs in Orlando was a renegotiation and extension, and there's some clauses in there that protects a team with that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I didn't think I was gonna talk so much Sixers tonight, but okay.
You've triggered me.
So you've made some quite interesting comments recently about the Utah Jazz and the whole tanking, and pretty much got some interesting feedbacks. That was probably the most I've seen Bobby Marks' name on.
I know. I wasn't trending well in Salt Lake City,
and I know that was probably not what you wanted, but for people who are going to be listening to us and have just maybe seen clips or whatever online,
can you go back and
what your position was? And
so it's also the power of social media and TV and all these other things where basically it kind of takes. It's like, you ever play the when you were little, like they call it the telephone game, where like you start with 30 people and you say something, and by the time it gets to the 30th person, the message is totally kind of like discombobulated and everything like that. So Utah was playing a game in Orlando and Miami. This was right after the trade deadline that weekend. And in that game, they took out their starters in the fourth quarter and then up winning.
I lost money on that game.
Okay. And didn't put them back in. So you're a just not happy customer, right? From a different angle. So they did not put those guys. They didn't put their players in because the reality is that they are trying to retain their pick, because if it falls outside of the top 8, it goes to Oklahoma State. They wound up winning the Miami game. They lost to they would have won the Orlando game, but they took their starters out. So on TV on Monday, I wasn't even supposed to be on TV that day, but I was, and I had called. They had asked me, "Hey, find out about what teams are saying about tanking." And I had called around to my friends in the league, and they said, "Listen, like we get it. Like what happens, like how the rules are set up is that for you to draft well and get good picks. However, what Utah did is that, and I said this on TV. Now, what I probably should have said was like, this is what teams are telling me, is that Utah is messing around with they're screwing around with the integrity of the game. So that kind of like set the alarms off. So that did not put me in good graces with my friends in Salt Lake City. Not the Jazz people, but basic fans, right? Like it was like fans came out of the woodwork. So they get fined. So that becomes a hot topic, right? And they get fined by the commissioner $500,000. Indiana gets fined for resting Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, 100,000. Ridiculous, if you ask me.
Yeah, I don't agree with that one. One, I don't even agree with the 500,000 one, because it's like a slippery slope as far as like. So in the press release, it says that basically like they based off like the integrity conduct detrimental to the league by taking players out of the starting lineup, whatever. I think you're on a slippery slope when you have the league acting as big brother and are looking at roster rotations, who's playing, who comes out of the game. So they get fined. And what I said was, listen, for a billionaire, it's basically a drop in the bucket. All right, let's come on.
It's true.
There are teams out there that would basically write a blank check and fines where if you can get yourself a top pick, it
Our
changes
dear Clippers
everything.
owner.
Sure, it changes everything. Like it changes the dynamics of the team. I mean, how much do you think Victor Wembanyama is worth to the San Antonio Spurs?
I saw him
Right?
yesterday.
Yeah, yeah. How's that? Come up close. It wasn't even. It was like a C minus game. Oh, they still won by 40.
Man.
So that's what I said. Now, what I did not know is that the owner of the Jazz was going to take that to heart. I didn't even know what he had said until Woj. Well, I think Woj actually told me. He's like, "You're not making friends in Salt Lake City," and I was like, "I have no idea what's going on." And so he said basically like, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it is like how it impacts me with this fine, and basically you have like amnesia and stuff from whatever." So I did not respond to that, and of course, yes, the state of Utah was all up in arms. Now, what I'll say is, and I went on TV the next day on NBA Today. I said, "Listen, we have a system in place that rewards teams for losing. That's the reality of it. The system's been in place forever. Like in the league has changed the lottery odds and flattened it, and it makes it less advantageous to have the number one pick, right? You'd almost rather have like the fourth worst record going in. So we have a system in place. Until the league fixes the system, we're going to keep on doing it. Like, and maybe I had my moment where I was like, you know what, enough. Like enough of this. So how do we create a different system and stuff? And that's what the league is going to figure out. And I said on TV, I raised my hand. I go, I am part of the system. So I went on TV and talked about Giannis in Milwaukee. And you know what I said about that? For the best interest of the Bucks, it'd probably be best if he didn't play the rest of the year because they're old. They haven't built their team through the draft and they have a chance. They don't control their pick until 2031. And here's their opportunity to get a top 7 pick.
Yeah.
So I said probably I agreed with the tanking sentiment and all that stuff, but that is kind of what I said, and that's what that caused an uproar, and it got the league to. I don't think it was me who got the league to react, but the commissioner addressed it on the All-Star game Saturday press conference. He was asked twice, and I think at the end of the day, the league is embarrassed. Right? Like there are teams out there that it's never, and I talked about this with Perk and Danny Green on TV, like players do not lose on. I think what gets construed is like when people say tank, it's like players losing on purpose. That's not happening. Like what can happen is that as a front office, I am giving the coach less to work with. That's tanking, right? Like where I'm saying, tonight we're going to rest 2 guys because, like that is kind of manipulating with the game. Now, the league will probably make changes eventually. I don't know what they'll be. They'll probably do something because they had a, call with the GMs and, the commissioner basically said there's going to be changes and everything. So that was kind of the tanking. It's a shame because there's a lot of great storylines this year. What's going on in Detroit? What's Charlotte? The West. We all thought OKC was the runaway champ, and now it's like, San Antonio, and there's a lot of different things and stuff. So that was the that's kind of what drew the ire as far as with in Utah and everything.
I mean, as much as I also don't think it's.
I mean, you had the process.
System is right. But even with the process era, even when you go back to last year,
what's different? What's different? Like the process era and what Oklahoma City and all these other teams did. Like, I don't care if you want to go out and have 4 guys on 3-year contracts that we've never heard of before, and that's going to be your starting 5. Like, I don't care. Like, if you want to do that, that's fine. Now you have to basically sell that to your customers who come and pay money. What I have an issue with is when you manipulate the game when it's going on. That's what I had an issue with.
I agree with you. because that's when I think ownership pretty much comes in and because it's going to hit the pockets there. So, the manipulation kind of comes in from that end. But hey, if that got to give me a VJ Edgecombe, I think,
Yeah, listen, right? Like that changes the dynamics of the Sixers. Imagine if you would have given up the 8th pick in the draft, went to Oklahoma City. And this year you had your own, and it's the 18th pick.
even this year, I think the top 4 protected is I think our pick is top 4 protected. Otherwise, it conveys to Oklahoma City. Listen, part of me is like, I hope we could maybe get a Dallas Maverick situation this year. Hey, who knows? So, from a front office perspective, right, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I want to know when you tanking, and you touched on it with players still want to be competitive and all that, but how do you pretty much balance your players still want to be competitive and you on the other end as the front office looking at the bigger picture and trying to go get better talent for cheap?
Well, I mean, sometimes it's just organically, like there's injuries, right? Like you sometimes just have like Sacramento's got Levine, Sabonis, and Hunter out. So now you're basically forced to play all your younger players. Or if you're Utah and you've got no Kessler, Jackson, um,
Marketing
you
in
still
and
have
out.
marketing. Yeah. So sometimes it just happens. I think there's sometimes like where you make a concerted effort where instead of playing a player 30 minutes a night, now you're playing him 20 minutes a night, and almost kind of treating it like almost like a preseason game because you're trying to get from a player development standpoint. I think what's different this year is that we've seen this done a lot earlier, right? Like we saw it in like January and maybe early February. It started because this draft class could be really good. Um, and there are teams, as I said, like that picks that are protected. And they're basically saying like, if both those picks are not conveyed, they don't turn into anything, or maybe like a second round pick. So if you're if you're the Wizards and you're the Jazz, you're saying like, great, bring it. You can bring in tanking rules next year, right? Like we're going to have a really good pick, and we're going to play Trey Johnson a lot more, and Trey Young we're going to make the league happy and roll out Trey Young and play him 25 30 minutes and see how he fits with the players and stuff like that. So I think there's, like, as I said, like you're basically kind of you're expanding your rotation. Instead of maybe having an 8-man rotation, you look at the box scores. I've
Yeah.
never seen some of the guys play 20 minutes, right? Like bench, like just 23 24 minutes a game.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I mean, even with the King situation, just like you said earlier, I guess it's all about how you're doing it, right? Because I mean, they obviously injuries are impacting them, but I'm loving the minutes that Maxime Renault is giving them. For instance, that's the guy that I wanted my GM to get in the second round last year instead of Janiyah Broome, for instance. So you also get the chance to if it's done in a more ethical way, to start developing your younger guys earlier and see what they got, because I mean, even going back to Boston, I'm
Sure.
sure the goal was not necessarily be extremely competitive, or obviously Joe Mazzulla and Brad Stevens will tell you otherwise, but developing these players has tremendously helped them and is setting them up now for the future to be extremely competitive again too.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah, I really think with this whole thinking situation and the conversations, I'm looking forward to them. And if Commissioner Adam Silver was putting a committee together to kind of think about this and give him some solutions, would you be interested in being on that committee?
Sure. Sign me up.
All right, okay.
It's
Well,
not snowing when I go to New York.
I got some rapid fire questions for you, real quick, and then I'm gonna get you out of here, Bobby. Like I told you, I think Sam Presti is the best GM in the league for me. Who would you say the most underrated GM?
I mean, I don't know if Brad Stevens is underrated, but golly geez, he does a good job. I mean, he's done a terrific job as far as I love when players or when teams find guys that are kind of as I said, in the picks in the 20s or second round picks, and I think what he's been able to do has been really, really good. Yeah.
Amazing. I would agree with him. I mean, God, Hugo Gonzalez and Jordan Walsh and Dimas Queta and man, even Peyton Pritchard. It's you can just go on and on. It's a tremendous job. And even last year, the money that he saved to the ownership group in Boston and the way he's done it is just amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's done a terrific job.
Yeah, shout out to Brad Stevens. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna still ask it. Hardest cap situation to fix in the league?
Hardest cap situation to fix. Ooh, it's a good question. I mean, listen, Philly's not ideal. The two guys, they got to be healthy. When they're healthy, they're a tough out. He used to be Phoenix. That they've kind of cleaned up their books. It's funny. I would almost rather be a team not buried in a cap, but I would rather be somewhere in between than a team that has $70 million in cap space. Like, I don't envy the Lakers this summer. Like,
Interesting.
we're going to talk about them like saying, "Oh, they got all this money for who? For who? Right? For who?"
Yeah, you're right. And unfortunately, you got to spend 90% of the money. You can't just um, roll it. Most team friendly contract in the league right now.
Colin Gillespie, $2.3 million minimum. Guy's going to get paid next year. Peyton Pritchard's another one. I mean, making $10, $11 million, maybe even less.
Early
Cada,
championship prediction.
yeah.
Oh yeah, the mascot. Yeah, and I hope he gets paid too. I really love his story. Early championship predictions.
OKC when they're healthy, man. Like, they're still a tough out. I mean, like, when they got their guys out there with Caruso and Jalen, San Antonio is going to be interesting to me. I think I don't buy the whole like they're so young. I would say that the first game one of the first round will probably be the hardest game they'll play all playoffs, just because that always is. You're a little more tighter with that and everything. So. But OKC, it's hard to bet against them.
Well, San Antonio got them 3 times this year.
Hey, Boston, if Boston can get Tatum back, different dynamic.
Would you advise him coming back?
I think if he's ready to come back, you let him. It's basically going to be his call. If the doctors feel like he's strong enough and he wants to come back, then then it's up to him. It's up to the player.
Yeah, if he's back, I think it's really him and Detroit in the East for me. I mean, the Knicks are still in there for sure. Cleveland, I gotta see it. I don't know. I gotta see it. But San Antonio, man, I was at the game yesterday. It was painful to watch for sure.
Yeah.
But man, Stephen Castle
Yeah, he's pretty
does
good.
not look like a 2-year player. His whole demeanor, how he plays, just seems like he's been in the league for years. And Dylan Harper, and obviously Wemby, and man, even with San Antonio as well, the job that the front office did out there by adding a guy like Luke Cornett in that mix, and Champagne out there. It's just I don't buy the too young either, man. I feel like, especially with where they are in the standings, it's gonna be matchup based, and they match up pretty well against a lot of teams in the West.
Yeah, I agree.
Bobby has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much again for your time. I love this whole hour that we spent together, and thanks. I appreciate you for answering those questions and breaking down all these good stuff that we've talked about, and continue to be great. We're gonna continue to listen to you and watch you on ESPN. Hopefully, I'm praying one day maybe for the right situation in the front office again. Why not? As a GM. And best of luck with the rest of your week and the season, man.
Sounds good. Good talking with you, buddy.
Likewise, have a good one.
You too.